Welcome to Rambam in Depth. Today we'll be discussing the Rambam Hilchos Yibum וחליצה Perik Vav Halacha Yud. The Rambam rules as follows. There's a din of Yibum that if a person dies without children, his wife is obligated to marry her husband's brother or get chalitzah. And here's a case where she's not allowed to marry the husband's brother. So the Rambam says as follows: Haisa hayavama asura al yavama isur lava isur esa haisa ושנייה. If there was a prohibition, either a negative commandment, a positive commandment, such as marrying a mitzri and a daimi, only third generation are you allowed to marry them, so that it's based on a mitzvah's esa. If the Torah says in the third generation you can marry them, but that means only the third, not the second or the first. So that's based on a mitzvah's esa. Or there was a rabbinical prohibition. So what is the halacha? He's not allowed to marry this woman. So, but the answer is harezu chiletzes v'lemusiyavebes. You get chalitzah and no yibum. So the question is, why is there chalitzah? Why is there need for chalitzah? So the Rambam asked the question, mepnei צריכה חליצה. The reason you need chalitzah is mepnei sheyesh bo lekuchen, because there is a valid status to the marriage. If he did marry the women that are prohibited to him, hayol v'kedushin tevsim behen harehin zekukas liyavim. Because kedushin does take effect. There's a halacha that if you marry someone who's an erva, who's forbidden with the penalty of karis or Mrs. Bezdin, in those cases the marriage doesn't take effect. If a person marries a sister, he gives her a ring and he says, I'm marrying you, there's no need for a get, there's no marriage there. But chayvi lavin, or chayvi esa, or shniya, in any of those cases, even though it's forbidden to marry those people, if they did marry, it is a valid marriage and you need a get. And therefore there's a din of Yibum. So then the question is, why is there no Yibum? So the Rambam explains there's a gazira. The Chachamim made a decree, and they said that there shouldn't be any Yibum. But because there's absolutely no biblical reason why there can't be Yibum, you have to have at least chalitzah. Therefore, he concludes, if the person violated and he married the sister-in-law where there was a lav, where there was a positive commandment that said he wouldn't be allowed to marry her, certainly if it was a rabbinical, it's a total acquisition. In other words, it's a totally valid marriage, Yibum, but he's not allowed to stay married to her because she's forbidden. And he has to then send her away with a get. Why? Because he's fully married to her, even though it was forbidden. The marriage took effect, although it was illegal, and therefore he has to give her a get. And the mitzvah of Yibum was fulfilled. But in Chatchila, he's not allowed to marry her. He's not allowed to do Yibum, so he has to give her at least chalitzah. So the question is asked, the Marshal and many other Chreinim asked the question, when the Rambam includes a mitzvah's esa together with a mitzvah's lo tasa, there's a little bit of a problem. We know that esa deicha lo tasa, a positive commandment could push away a negative commandment, and therefore it's a valid marriage if he takes her. But a positive cannot push away a positive. My ulma hi esa my esa. Why is this positive better than the other positive? So if that's the case, since the positive can't push away the positive, there is no mitzvah. There's no mitzvah's esa of Yibum. So why do you need chalitzah altogether? There's no mitzvah's esa. And how could the Rambam say that if he did marry her, he has to give her a get? Why? There's no marriage. There was no mitzvah's esa. So the Noda B'Yehuda gives an answer. He says, why is it that a positive mitzvah cannot push away another positive? It's because my ulma, hi esa, my esa. Why is this one stronger than this? Why is A stronger than B? Why is B stronger than A? But it doesn't mean that there is no mitzvah's esa. In other words, if he did marry, he violated the law. The esa said he shouldn't marry this woman, and he violated that. Now you're going to tell him that it's not a valid marriage. Why? Because you tell him because of mitzvah's esa. But why is this esa stronger than the other one? It works both directions. So l'chatchila, he's not allowed to marry her because maybe that esa is more important. The esa that says he's not allowed to marry her. But once he did take her, and you're trying to say that marriage doesn't take effect, it's because you're giving precedence to the other mitzvah esa. What gives you a right to give precedence to that? Rabbi Kiva Eger, in his Taisus Rabbi Kiva Eger and Mishnayos, gives another answer. He says, when you're talking about a mitzvah esa, that a esa can't push away another esa, there are two types of mitzvah aseh. One is where you're told to do something. You have a commandment to do something, and there's another esa standing in its way. So we say, ein esa deicha esa. One positive cannot push away another positive. But when you're talking about an essa that's a negative essa, in other words, the Torah tells you that a Mitzri, you can marry a Mitzri in the third generation, implying that before the third generation you can't. That's a lav haba mikal essa. That's a negative that comes from an essa. If it's a negative comes from an essa, it doesn't have the status of a mitzvah essa that's stronger than a lois asa. It's like any lois asa. In fact, it may be weaker than any other lois asa because it's only based on an essa. At any rate, there's no reason why that essa cannot push away the other essa, because we're not dealing with a mitzvah essa where there's kum v'aseh. And that distinction is relevant, it makes sense, based on the two of the reasons given why an essa is deicha leitasa. The Rambam famously says, because a mitzvah essa is motivated by ava, by love. A mitzvah leitasa is motivated by yira, and ava is greater than yira. So in that case, when the mitzvah aseh is really a negative, it's shev al taisa, don't marry this person, it's based again on yira, not on ava, because the ava motivates you to do something. Yira motivates you not to violate. And therefore, mitzvah essa that's essentially a negative, even though it's phrased in the positive, is capable of being overridden by another mitzvah aseh. The second explanation given by the Alter Rebbe in Tanya, the way the Rebbe explains it, is that a mitzvah essa is deicha leitasa. Why? Because a mitzvah essa, if you don't do it, you're missing the accomplishment of the mitzvah essa. The light that it generates, the spiritual energy that it generates, is going to be missing. You could do tshuva, and that won't help to regenerate that which was lost. You can get rid of the chet of rebelliousness by doing tshuva, but you can't make it up. That's when a mitzvah leitasa, if you violate it because you had a mitzvah essay and that pushed it away, there's no violation. If there's no violation, there's no reason why the essay shouldn't push away the leitasa. But however, that's only true if the essay is one of action. If the essay is one of action, then another essay can't push it away. Why should one essay push away another one? They both generate the light. But if in the case where the other essay is only a negative, so in that case, if the positive essay could push it away, there won't be a problem. There won't be any transgression because the positive pushed it away. Whereas the positive is going to be violated if you allow the other essay to dominate, then the positive will be eliminated. And whatever light, whatever energy, whatever positive energy is generated by that mitzvah will be missing, and therefore the essay could push away the other essay.